You're such an asshole.
Oh boy there, Lieutenants. We got a long one. It's just explaining Islamic finance and economics. That's all. This guy says, what's your opinion on this video? I'm like, well, then I just opened up a can of worms. I'm like, oh shit, I should have charged him a lot more. But I quoted him his price and the prices that he paid. So strap yourselves in, Lieutenants. This is going to be a lengthy one. Let me find the email. Hang on. Islamic economics, aerospace engineer. We went back and forth. Okay, basically he sent me a link to a video. The title was, what do you think about Islamic economics? Then, and I kind of suspected this. I thought it was maybe talking about Islamic finance, and there is a difference. Finance is merely how you finance and pay for things. Economics is the larger economic study on how we produce the most amount of stuff and get wealth and all stop being poor, and we don't have to worry about working and food and all that other stuff. So obviously, finance is a sub-study within economics, although a key one. So I clicked. He says, well, I didn't know there was a difference. And I watched the video. Great video, by the way. I'll put it down below. And it was about Islamic finance. And so he's like, well, how about both? I'm like, I said, I'll do finance because economics is frankly. But then I delved into it. I had to drive out to Wisconsin for a funeral. And I'm like, I'll download, so I can listen to these podcasts. And I learned a lot, and it's kind of interesting. So I will share my thoughts and results and research and all that. So let's deal with economics first, because this is, even though it's more complicated, I believe it's the simpler of the two. Islamic economics, ever so succinctifying it, is a structure, guidelines, or an outline complying with Sharia law written in the Quran about how an economy should operate. More recently, you have what I would consider self-appointed experts claiming that between communism and capitalism there's a third way, and that is Islamic economics. And they always focus, the first thing they focus on, which tells me they're communist lights, or at least socialist, is we got to do something about income redistribution. Oh, the income distribution is so warped. And I'm like, okay, so you're just socialist. And listening to it, I'm just like, okay, you basically... And it could be well-intended. It could be very well-intended. I'm always suspicious of people saying, we need to give these people's money to these people money. My question is, excuse me, did they earn their monies fairly? And what gives you the right to take their time, because that's what money is, give their part of their lives to these other people? So you're more popular and you get the votes? But, you know, in Saudi Arabia there's no vote. Anyway, in Iran you don't vote. The point is, I'm a cynic, I'm a misanthrope, I don't trust humans worth a damn. And I believe it's more of a, at best it is a well-intended intention on the part of Islam and Muslims to like, hey, let's get the economy going through Islam. I think there's some wisdom, and there actually is. You'll find out, especially in the finances, some things I like about it. But by and large, it's no different than socialism light with, hey, do what this religion says. It's basically socialism light with the benefits of theocracy on top of it. And I like as little governments as possible. And I already don't like a secular one we got. I certainly don't need another fucking religious one like I did when I was forced to go to church. So it's kind of like, hey, Christians say you should tithe to the church. Really? Oh, who knew? So let's explain it. Let's just look at it empirically. There is only one economic system. There always has been. It doesn't matter if communism is implemented. Doesn't matter if Christianity is. We call it feudalism. Everybody wants as much money and their own free lives to their own goddamn selves. That's it. People want to be left the fuck alone and be rich as hell and free to do what they want. Right? Now, that's capitalism. That's human nature. That's why it's cute. Like in communism, every economic system, everyone pick it throughout history. There's always been a free market. You know, you guys remember jeans in the 80s back in the Soviet Union? Those were illegal, and the communists said no, but somehow the jeans still got in. Didn't the government in the socialist kind of way ban drugs in the United States. It's amazing because, no drugs get here, right? There's no drugs whatsoever. And so that's what it's like gold or the nuclear family, marriage specifically, more so. Before we knew everybody existed on the other side of the planet, gold and silver magically became kind of default currencies no matter what culture you're in. Mayan, European, Indochina, the gold was pretty popular. And isn't it interesting that marriage is kind of universal, which forms a foundation. and they had ceremonies that, even though we'd never seen each other's cultures before, we said, hey, you guys do that marriage thing too? We do the same thing, but with different looking funny hats. And so capitalism is this same naturally forming phenomena in all cultures. And you can have governments and tyrants and democracies and republics and theocracy, whatever you want. Doesn't matter if you're Romans, Saudis, modern day Americans, or the old school ones that used to exist in the past. Everybody wants their fucking money and their fucking time. And the best governments can really do is allow them to keep it, protect property rights, and prevent people from stealing it. So there's some laws that have to be implemented. Then if you want to be more literal, I thought, well, boy, everyone keeps focusing on wealth distribution. So I looked up the Gini coefficients, which measure how equally or unequally incomes and wealth are distributed within these different countries. And I had to kind of do some digging because not all the Muslim countries out there, what is a Muslim country? Because there's a large Muslim population in India, but it's not really considered Muslim. But anyway, so the U.S. has a Gini coefficient of 46, Saudi Arabia 45, Qatar 41, Turkey 40.2, Indonesia 36.8, Yemen 37.5, Malaysia 46.2, Iran 44.5, and then there's others, but to be honest, I didn't know if Turkmenistan was a predominantly Muslim majority population or not. And they've had, like, Pakistan was in the 20s. But then that's the United States, take other Western countries, like, well, compared to Western economics, well, Sweden's down to 27, but they're outright socialists. All of Europe has got a lower Gini coefficient than the United States, pretty much. So they're claiming that this Islamic economic system, Islamic economics, this economy, we have lower income distribution, wealth distribution is not a problem. No, and obviously, it's a little bit better than the United States. Not Indonesia's not even a full 10 points. Nobody there I got it. Like they're 5 to 9. Well, Saudi's right there with us. Malaysia's even worse than us. So it's not measurably better. So if Islamic economics was supposed to produce less wealth disparities, I'm not seeing it in the numbers. All right. Then there's simple history, economic growth. Capitalism beat the fucking shit out of everything else. Theocracy, communism, socialism, we just plain beat the fuck out of everything else. And even the United States today, which is not capitalist, by the way, I must remind you, because we did bail out our banks, we're about to bail out our students, and we have tax rates around about 42%. I'm sorry, 38%. Oh, things did go down a little bit since Obama's peak. Where was I going with this? Historically, the capitalist countries have just unfathomably outproduced every other economics because it's the closest to reality. It's the laws and the economic system that is based in human nature. And when you base things in reality, it's amazing how much success you get. So again, if Islamic economics was working, you'd have Malaysia, Indonesia, Morocco, Yemen, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia. These would be economic powerhouses within their own rights. And admittedly, some of them have spectacular wealth, but that's because oil. You take away oil, you're then kind of relegated and left with your Pacific Rim Muslim countries that largely owe their economic growth to the United States exporting, and the Western world exporting their textiles and cheap manufacturing, and not to mention China's 20-year economic boom. So they used the Asian tiger before the Asian currency crisis back in the 90s. I used to be an economist and studied that shit back in the day. It really had nothing to do with a religion. So I think they're opportunists because, again, I am a misanthrope. I don't trust humans. I think these are opportunists who want to advance Islam under the guise of economics. Some may actually believe that data, but they better be intellectually honest with themselves and start studying the history of the world's economies and find out which economies have done the best, because I don't see a track record for Islamic economics. But honestly, I don't think there is such a thing as Islamic. I mean, come on, Christian economics, Hindu economics. No, one's a religion, one is an economic system, and the two shan't intertwain. Clary economics. Hey, if all the big-titted redhead girls who are hot and under the age of 30 line up and give me a blowjob, GDP will just fart from the sky. It's no. If you put, it's kind of like African American or Caucasian American. If you're using hyphenated American names and you're using hyphenated things before economics, you really care more about the prefix than you do care about what the suffix is. Anyway, so that's it. In other words, I don't believe there's such a thing as Islamic economics. I think it's not even a fringe study. I think it's for people who want to advance their religion. Not that the economic history of Islamic nations. That would be interesting. There'd be some things. The Mali Empire, although the Mali Empire, that was even before Muhammad was born. But anyway, it's not that you can't learn. It's just that it's the two, they don't Venn diagram. They're separate studies. They're separate fields. All right, now, Islamic finance. So this video that he provided, the guy was a very good speaker. He was talking about how there is a rise in Islamic financing because Islam bans, among other things, the charging of interest and usury. And he was talking about how to be Sharia compliant, to be Islam compliant, Islamic banks must follow certain rules from the Quran and Sharia law, because they're Islamic banks. Yes, you can't say I'm a Christian bank and then do unchristian things. I don't think there's such a thing as a Christian bank anyway. And he was talking about how, because of the rules and laws by which Islamic banks must obey in the Quran, they're inherently less risky. And not one of them needed a bailout during the financial crisis. And then what some people have pointed out is like, hey, look, these Islamic banks, they're pretty stable. They're pretty conservative, like banking should be. They didn't need a bailout. They didn't cost their taxpayers nothing. Can we learn something from them? And do they potentially have a better financing system, not economic system, lending system, banking system? So they started delving into it and say, okay, well, what are these rules that Islam has that these banks have to follow, and how does that slightly differ or differ at all from non-Islamic banks? All right. So the first thing, nothing that is haram, meaning forbidden, vice. You can't finance a booze distillery. Nothing to do with pork. I don't know why that is still a thing, but that's a whole completely other thing. We have refrigeration technique, guys. You got to look into it. No prostitution, no financing of casinos, stuff like that. All right. So anything that is considered haram, you can't finance it. You can't deal with it. Okay. Another one, you cannot charge interest. Now, this is slightly different depending on the interpretation. It effectively means you cannot charge interest, but what it really means is that there's no guaranteed returns for one party while the other party takes risk. And translated into English, that means if you lend someone money in a conventional modern-day bank, you charge them 5% interest. That person then goes and takes the proceeds from the loan and invests it in a venture where you don't know what the rate of return is going to be on that venture. Is it going to be enough to pay off the 5? Is it going to be for 13? Is it going to be minus 10? We don't know. And according to Islamic law, that's not right. That's not kosher or whatever. It's not haram. It's something else. It's against the rules. You can't do that. So the person, one party has a guaranteed rate of return. The other guy takes all the risk. And so they say, well, you can't do that. So effectively, you cannot charge someone a set fixed interest rate. And then this turns into another thing I'll get to where they get around it by saying, okay, you can take a joint venture together and have equity shares, and you could negotiate what the the percentage split, are we 50-50, 70-30? What's the split between the technical lender and technical borrower? But both are vested interest parties and both share either the risk of rate or a positive rate of return or a rate of loss. So, and a lot of people criticize it, the Islamic banks, say, oh, they're just working around it. They're just doing the same thing. And not really. They are saying, look, no, you got to have an actual equity investment, both parties. Now, why they wrote that, I don't know. I don't agree with it. I think, yeah, if someone wants to lend you a certain interest, somebody signs and you guys agree, and that's okay. But anyway, those are the rules. Again, the profit and loss sharing that's implied with that. Nothing that is greedy or speculative. A little gray, but there's no speculation. Like all you Americans do with your 401k plans. I just throw in the money and keep going up. Why? Because reasons? Because it always has in the past. So that's very interesting. And then a clear understanding on both parties. This is, again, I just give you my money, okay, la 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 la. Or only 10 years ago, you idiots were signing mortgages you didn't bother to read. Or today, how pretty much all the millennials didn't read the thing and say, well, I gotta pay it back. Bernie Sanders, come save me, take money from those people and give it to me. Because you are just so smart, aren't you? You guys are so smart. The most educated generation. So there has to be clear understanding. I think that's written more to no trickery, no bullshit, no legalese. Hey, the borrower, there's no borrower lender. The party A and party B got to understand very clearly what the terms of the conditions are. So not bad, not necessarily bad rules. Nothing, you might be against not financing casinos or strip clubs, but you can see the logic and reason as to why these rules and laws would exist. Okay, so there's a problem, though. One, nothing that is haram. Well, this is kind of a problem, although not a huge problem, because, and this is the difference between Islamic and non-Islamic culture. There's just a bunch of stuff that you immediately cut out of your economy. Vice, well, pretty much all vice. So no booze. Well, that's how America was founded, frankly, was booze. Great documentary by Mike Rowe, How Booze Built America. No tobacco, no strip clubs, no casinos. Again, you could see why vice is bad, but here in the United States and other non-Muslim countries, it's like, wait, it's none of our business. Are you hurting anybody else? We don't care. So you immediately disqualify yourself from participating, engaging in, and producing GDP in different fields and sectors. But that's, people don't want to drink, they don't want to drink, that's fine. Then there's understanding by both parties, no problem there. That's how it should be. Nothing that is greedy or speculative. It's like, again, this gets back to the principle of, well, if both people understand clearly and you lend your money to Trailer Trash McGee and he goes and pisses it on moonshine in the strip club, well, don't be surprised that your bank got taken. Although me personally, yeah, I don't do speculative investing. I still look at cash flow. That's what an old fuddy-duddy I am. So for me personally, yeah, I don't speculate. I invest. I want a rate of return. And then these things they're fine. There's no real problem there. The problems come in structurally, functionally, in two of the rules. One, no interest. So, again, the no guaranteed risks while the other party takes the risk. And then the profit and loss sharing. Okay? Now, this ties the hands a little bit because if there was, and this gets back to the secular or theocratic issue, if Bob and Phil are sitting in the desert and Bob wants to lend Phil $500 and they agree to interest rates and term, it can be done. But you've added this extra layer of government. It just happens to be a theocracy. It just has to be a religion, Islam. All right? Now you got another layer of regulation you got to deal with. And some things are going to be prohibited and some aren't. And that no interest thing, that's like, well, we can't do lending now, while the rest of the world operates that way. Also, the profit and loss sharing, I understand the reason for it. You want people to have vested interest. But that's a big deterrent. It's like, no, I mean, it's like, no, that's my money. You either take this deal or I walk. Especially if you're a developing country, a developing nation, you have to be Islamic, and you go to the IMF or the United States or just an investment bank, say, we would like you to, I don't know, build us an oil rig here, and we'd like to go in this as a joint venture, and it'd be like, no, we'll lend you the money, but we're not having any ownership in that. You're going to pay us first, and then if there happens to be any money left over, that's fine. And so people who don't want to be equity investors, I don't want to be an equity investor in your road system. Have your taxes, have your people pay for that. So you're going to deter a lot of investment, and that also may crimp economic growth, especially, again, if you're a developing nation. Right? So what they've come up with more recently, and there's a council of imams, I think it would be a council of imams. The finance experts, Islamic finance experts, they interpret Sharia and the Quran, and they say, okay, here are these workarounds. And I hate to use that word because it's not a workaround. It was, in their words, compliant with Sharia law. It was compliant with the rules set forth in the Quran, of which there's more. I didn't want to bore you with too much of them. And then the criticism of these is that they're like, that is legitimate. Okay, I see how that is compliant. But then there's this, dude, that's just hanky-panky. That's just like you going, here's a perfect example. I'll give you two examples I always wanted to talk about. Now's the perfect time. For example, if you ever argue with a communist or a socialist, they advocate stealing your money. That's all it is. They want your money. You give me your money. But they come up with a new word for it. They call it social democracy. And then they think that's all better. It's like, wait a minute. So you all vote, 51% say it's all right that you guys take half my money and give it to yourselves. They're like, yeah. It's like, well, that's still theft. No, it isn't. It's social democracy. It's like, no. It is. It doesn't matter. I didn't want to give you my money. You took my money through force. Either you had the balls to put a gun in my face and challenge me and get it that way, or you had the military put guns, several layers removed through a legal system in my face and threaten me with jail time and take my money. It's still theft, but they euphemistically call it social democracy. Then there's a, what is it? A Jewish lighter? Shabbat candle. Is this the Shabbat lighter? Hang on, is this it? Shabbat. Shabbat lighter. So you hear this out. This is Shabbat. What is a butane lighter? What is a Shabbat lighter? I thought there'd be a Wikipedia. What is Shabbat lighter? Lighting a Shabbat candle in a jiffy with this imported metal glass lighter. The lighter is filled with gas and can be refilled once. Just push on the switch to ignite the flame. It's just perfect. No, that wasn't it. Is this what it's called? There's some kind of lighter in the Jewish tradition where you're on Lent or you're fasting or giving something up. And you cannot use any electricity. You cannot use modern day. And maybe this is one more the Hasidic law. Somebody down below tell me what this was. My boy was telling me about it. And so what they did is they came up with this lighter. And it doesn't work every time. And it's a completely random thing. I don't know how they make it random, but they make it random. So that you don't know if it's going to work or not. But yeah, you hit it 60 times, it'll light. Hey, it lit. No, it can light. Well, that's cheating. That's not that. If it's said in the Torah, go without light or go without. These are your rules in your particular sect of Judaism. Then follow those rules. There's reason for it. But if you're just going to circumvent it, well, then you're not really following the rule. And so that's a criticism of it. So let me go through some of these. What happened to it? Did I lose it? Oh, darn it. Hang on. I thought I didn't close it. Darn it, I had it up. And I'll explain some of them, and that's why I wanted not Investopedia, Wikipedia. That's why I wanted this webpage up, because I was listening to the guy explaining it, and I was just... Because driving through Wisconsin is pretty boring. You're just kind of like this, because there's nothing to see in Wisconsin. Then it's like, well, you see this haram, and this hahat, and the chiba. Yeah, mudarachabach. Okay, so here's some things. A akad. A general term meaning a commitment between two parties. A shorter version, akt, is used to specifically refer to marriage or the marriage contract. It is forbidden in Islam for a single contract to cover more than one agreement. Single contract to cover more than one agreement. This defeats many attempts to make Western financial deals Sharia compliant. Buy al-ina, sale and buyback agreement. See, you can, and I'm in finance. Literally a loan in the form of a sale. Buy al-ina is a financing arrangement where the financier buys an asset from the customer on the spot basis with the price paid by the financier constituting the loan. Subsequently, the asset is sold back to the customer with deferred payment made in installments constituting paying back the loan. The use of the sale and buyback agreements varies in both jurisdictions and markets, reflecting the needs of consumers and investors in certain countries. These agreements are commonplace in Malaysia. I mean, okay, I didn't know what that meant. But you see, there's a lot of... They make it happen, but they throw added agreements. And I agree, like... I don't agree with it in principle, but I agree, okay, if you are going to force the theoretical lender and borrower to both be vested parties, yeah, then that's not a loan. You're not charging interest, the shared risk of profit and loss. Okay, that's compliant, that's legit. But then this one, by Bethaman Ajil. This concept refers to the sale of goods on a deferred payment basis at a price which includes a profit margin agreed to by both parties, like by al-ina. This concept is also used under Islamic financing facility. Interest payments can be avoided as the customer is paying the sales price, which is not the same as interest charged on a loan. The problem here is this includes linking two transactions in one which is forbidden in Islam. The common perception that this is simply straightforward charging of interest disguised as a sale. By mu'aljal, credit sale. Literally, by mu'aljal means a credit sale. Technically, it is a financing technique adopted by Islamic banks that takes the form of murabaha. That. It is a contract in which the bank earns a profit margin on the purchase price and allows the buyer to pay the price of the commodity at a future date in a lump sum or installments. It has to expressly mention cost of the commodity, and the margin of profits is mutually agreed. The price fixed for the commodity in such a transaction can be made the same as the spot price or higher or lower than the spot price. By muhal is also called deferred payment sale. This is a case where a bank acts as a retailer. Oh, this is the one I remember. Okay, the bank acts as a retailer as a bank earns a profit for a margin on the purchase price of a commodity and resells it to the borrower at a higher price, and the customer is invoiced to pay this at a later date, with the probability not on the rent of the money disallowed under Sharia. So again, rent, okay, that's another thing. Or the rent of such an asset, such as land allowed under Sharia, but the act of retailing physical commodities packaged in futures contracts such as gold, oil, and copper. You got to be a Chicago Mercantile Exchange trader to understand what this stuff is. And there's yeah, there's a bunch. There's, holy cow, wow. There's like 12 more of these things. Let me get back to my notes. So anyway, that's the workaround, but as you can see, it's very complicated. Now, as with anything, like short selling, for example, is a little bit more complicated than the average trade, but banks and traders can get it streamlined to the point it's almost seamless. That still doesn't mean that this doesn't take a little bit of doing, and there's a learning curve. Not to mention, you're thinking like, I gotta do what? You know, let's say you're Merrill Lynch and you want to start trading in Kuala Lumpur. I gotta obey all these rules. I gotta get thrice the amount of traders in on this thing. We gotta get trained up on it. Again, that becomes a deterrent. So yes, it will be compliant according to that council of financial imams, but you could see all the acrobatics and the extra work that goes into it and the overcomplication that results. But they have Islamic bonds. They're not technically bonds. They're Sharia compliant. And they have banks that will help you buy a house, but it's all these. It's not even all those rules. It's just a handful of rules require a lot of different working components and different agreements and contracts to make it so that it's compliant to essentially do the same thing that in a non-theocratic world would be just much simpler. Like, yeah, it's 5% interest amortized over 20 years. Pay it or we take your house. That's it. All right, so what does the old captain think? Answering our good client's question. I like the principles Islam tries to aim for. Because I worked in banking. It's what banking should have been. Should have been in the banking policies, matter of fact. I mean, and this has nothing specifically necessarily to do with Islam. This is common sense. This is just common sense spelled out. So yeah, I like no speculation, and you could go through any bank lending policy, and it'll be written there. They never follow it, but it'll be written there. We don't invest in speculation just because, we're not going to make loans on Bitcoin. Everybody understands. You'd hope, and here's where I would differ from Islam. You'd hope your clients would understand, but people are stupid. And if they can't understand an interest-adjustable loan, they can't understand that we take your collateral. I always got a kick out of it when we went to repossess collateral. These people get so fucking pissed. Especially in Wyoming. Like, bring your gun. What? It's like they just thought it was free money. And today you see it here. These stupid millennials. These dumb fuck millennials who just don't understand the concept of, like, it's not your money. The taxpayer was charitably kind to lend that to you interest-free for 4 years. So, whereas I agree with that in principle, and maybe banks should have made a lot more effort to say, do you understand this? And I understand with that on principle, but good luck getting that to happen in today's real world where people are morons. Prudent, good, disciplined lending. Not getting bailed out. I like that one a lot. But that is the function of what the banks were supposed to be conservative. And whether it's religious origins or just prudent lending origins, banking is not supposed to be exciting. We borrow from our depositors at 2%. We lend out on relatively risk-free things with adequate collateral positions at 5 or 6%. And then we make money. If you want to be risky, join an investment bank, which is all equity. You want to be risky, get a hedge fund. You want to be risky, go into commodities trading or day trading. But banking should be boring. And so, even though it has theocratic origins, I agree with it. All right, this is where I think American people and Westerners could learn, and governments could learn, spend less than you make. Not that hard. Not that hard. The problem, though, is I see three main hindrances with Islamic banking and finance. On principled ground, I don't like the idea of we don't charge interest, and thus everything has to be shared ownership. The reason I disagree with that principally is that's my money, and it's none of your business. Me and Bob, we don't have anything to do with Islam. I know, let's say we're living in Saudi Arabia. Yes, you would insist we do, but me and my stupid Western thinking, no, we don't. This is my money. Bob would like to borrow my money if I want to charge him 1% or 100% every year or every month, and he agrees. And of course we understand, because I would like to get my money. It's none of your damn business. Again, getting back to the why do we have an extra layer of government sticking their noses in what should be a private exchange. So I'd be very curious. We can't find out, but I'd be very curious to find out the reason why Muhammad wrote that. Why did he say there can't be interest? Usury, maybe I can understand that. But the concept of no interest, it's like, well, then I don't owe my money technically. I don't get to transact and do with my money as I please. If I'm fully, and here's the risk, there's certainly risk, it's that Bob don't pay me back. That's why we have credit analyst departments that are completely ignored, and then bankers. I didn't know. So I just disagree with that right there. I don't want to have a shared ownership. I don't want to. God Almighty, I would not want to invest in 90% of the bank equity. I would never want to take an equity position in bars and restaurants and semi-trailers and sheet metal fabricking and all the other shit that the trailer trash pieces of shit that I had coming through my piss-ass crap banks want to borrow money for. There's no way I'd want to have equity position. But now, for some reason, you're going to tell me how I got it. No, then apparently this is not my money. So that's one. Two, somewhat related, it puts religion in charge of financing. Again, not necessarily a bad thing, because lending should be conservative. There's a reason Islamic banks didn't need a bailout, because it's conservative. And these are not necessarily bad laws, not bad at all. Again, they'd make great lending policies, but that's not a theocracy's decision. That should be up to the bank as to what their bank lending policies are. Or, if you're going to be part of the Federal Reserve System and the FDIC, then it's the taxpayer's decision. We're getting off track. It's not, again, so I like the idea of having conservative principles in banking, but I don't want it being mandated by another layer of authority, namely a theocracy. So this just puts religion into and then this also opens up the risk that new rule. Hey, the imams came up with a new rule. You got to give the local mosque 10% of all your profits. Like the Roman Catholics did with tithing. Why is the Catholic Church the largest landowner? I don't know. So I don't like that. But keep in mind I'm a preacher's kid, and I had religion shoved down my throat. I want nothing to do with it. Get out of my fucking life. And then third and finally, this ties the hands of entrepreneurs and thus economic growth. And I'm not necessarily just talking Islamic countries, their vice industries are not growing and thus they miss out on economic growth. There's that, but then there's also some things where lending, if done right, lending can lead to great economic growth. I remember more commonly today, interest rates are so low. Businesses are profitable. They make 13%. Interest rates they can get at 3%. Why not do corporate buybacks? Or here's another thing. For whatever reason, Amazon they want to open up this $5 billion facility, and all the America's mayors are tripping over themselves to get it, and all of a sudden becoming Republican and cutting taxes and all of a sudden they like business all of a sudden. Let's say Amazon wanted to finance that with $5 billion in debt financing. Well, they couldn't do it, not under Islamic law. And so they'd have to go and get equity financing. Maybe they don't want to do that. And so maybe they say, okay, you won't let us do that. Well, then they're not going to set it up in Malaysia. They're not going to set it up in an Islamic country because they can't. So that but if it was a closed economy, then that investment would not happen, and then you wouldn't have those jobs. And it would be a sound investment, again, because you're earning safely, the company I mean, say 13% return on assets, the interest is only 2%, and they can more than easily cover that. But this then gets into the issue of speculations, greed, and risk, and this is where a good credit analyst department would come in. Now, at the same time, I understand we're lending frivolously, pointlessly, and stupidly based on greed comes in. And then all of a sudden you have a bubble burst like we did in 2008, 2009. Although even that, I would say, is part, if we let them crash and suffer and die the breathing, painful deaths they should have deserved, then that'd be perfect capitalism, would have been wonderful. And there are drawbacks. But what you're talking about is a difference between volatility and higher growth versus less volatility but less economic growth. So I think they're leaving a bit of good business left on the table, which, although, and that's fine if you don't want to take that bit of business because of religious reasons. But that's another thing, and not to mention the financing requirement. I was like, oh, I got to do what? I mean, I can only imagine being the poor banker that's got to know all those 14, 15 different products and how they work with leaseback deferred payment, swap options on Tuesdays if your brother is a quarter Greek. It's just so that right there, I think, will have other people walk away from the table. So overall, what I see with Islamic financing and its effect on the economy, it's going to be, what do you want? Do you want steady Eddie growth but slower growth, or do you want volatile growth where there's going to be ups and downs? There'll be some doozies of downs and be some doozies of ups, but overall the economic growth is higher. And that kind of falls in line with historical economics and finance. I mean, even this has happened in the United States as our government has gotten more and more involved and larger. Not only has our economic growth, our economic volatility, the change in the growth rate gone down, as well as our inflation. Our inflation has gone down and our economic growth volatility has gone down. Our actual economic growth has gone down as well, too, because we're not taking as many risks. And even though I'm a pessimist and I'm a misanthrope, there is some upside to taking big risks. I mean, you look at Playboy, Hugh Hefner, he died recently. He thought he was going to write one issue, and it ended up becoming, over the course of years, generating billions of dollars in revenue. So even my asshole consulting, I'd like, I'll pay $300. Yeah, I'll throw my $300 to get my website, and who knew? And now it's a quarter of my revenue. So you don't know. Now that was wise. I only threw $300 into it. I didn't throw the United States economy into recession. But I think there's some economic growth being left on. Matter of fact, I know there's economic growth being left on the table, both in the case of being compliant with Islamic financing law, as well as the United States having a larger and larger government, both in terms of taxation and percentage of the economy, as well as its intervention and control of the economy. And because our economic growth has gone down, but the volatility has gone down. I love how economists always want, let's get rid of the business cycle, like, one, you can, and like, two, that would be a good thing. And they never do. They just never get rid of it. Well, we have to tweak our models like global warming people do, and then we just haven't done it right. It's like, yeah, none of you guys ran a business, have you? You all got John Maynard Keynes' dick in your mouth, don't you? Shut up. So, in conclusion, I think banks could definitely learn from Islamic banking and the rules that are laid out in the Quran and Sharia law. I like the more conservative nature. I don't like the not charging of interest. I think that's just too restrictive. I like the lending policy, no speculation. I like both parties are very clear. And me personally, just on a personal level, and this is where individuals in non-Islamic countries could learn, is neither a borrower nor a lender be. Borrowing is dumb. I don't know how many times I've written it in my books. I don't know how many times man, debt is bad. Debt is the biggest evil on the planet in my humble secular world. Because the interest just sucks up your time. Just sucks up your time. You can't spend it with your family. You can't spend it with your friends. You can't spend it with yourself. You can't learn philosophy. You can't go out and do things. You can't go have fun. You're not free. All your time on this planet is spent paying for a McMansion, a car, a student loan, a master's degree, all this credit card debt, things and stuff. And you never... So I think there's some wisdom there to learn from. And certainly a good policy to have neither a lender nor a borrower be. But I do not want it coming with a gun pointed to my head because of an authority of a theocracy or a bunch of imams say I got to. And it's like, no. Because then what other new things come with that? What are the new things? So it's really a question of whether people individually decide to be wise and make the right decisions and be frugal and be smart and to be moral unto themselves. To not fall for the flash and the cash and the advertisements and the fancy cars and the party and the booze and all that other stuff. It's whether they can look past that and say, is this really going to make me happy? Is this really what's important in life? Do I need that? And therefore, if I don't, then I don't need to borrow the money. But forcing it through religious law or even secular law, no. Imagine that government says, you can't borrow money. Okay, well, that's worse than them saying, hey, sign this loan. I don't know how much, but it'd be more authoritarian and dictatorial. So no, I like to have my freedom. I want to occasionally put 20 on black. I occasionally like a good game of blackjack. But yeah, there's definitely, like every bank lending policy should be pretty close to that. Absolutely. Every commercial bank out there, and they should follow it too. But again, this is why the Islamic banks, they didn't need a bailout, and the American banks did. They didn't follow their lending policy. We have it. It's up to the individual. Now, let me ask you this. I'm not going to mention your name. Does everybody in your Islamic country, do they not drink booze? Is everybody not having premarital sex? And when Ramadan comes, do people follow that? See, it's up to the individual. Are you going to look? You can follow the wisdom in the lending policy. You can follow the wisdom written in the Quran or whatever other religious scripture. There's wisdom in these. There's a reason they were written, or not. It's just I wish people would suffer the fates, the full consequences if they did it. So. But yeah, no, there's definitely something to be learned from there. But it's just the no interest thing, and all the complications that come with that for the rest of the banks. But trust you me, don't worry. I've worked in banking. Western bankers are not going to learn from their mistakes. We're just going to bail them out again, and we'll keep making stupid mistakes. That's what's going to happen. So, all right, that's it. You guys got questions? Read my book, Behind the Housing Crash. That was very germane to this topic. And we have my other book, Poor Richard's Retirement, also germane. It talks about how if you put humans in the front of your life, at the core of your life, it's not that it's an essay really, then you will not need stuff, and then you won't be poor. You don't need that much in life. So that's it. All right, you guys got questions, go to assholeconsulting.com. We'll see you guys later. Tools.